Today, we're digging into one of the most legendary stories in modern business. It's about how a corporate giant, a name that was everywhere, well, it vanished. This is a story about a single decision, one $50 million mistake that changed, well, everything.
So let's just start with this number, because it really sets the stage. $5 billion. That's what Blockbuster was worth at its absolute peak in the early 2000s. They were a titan. A truly unstoppable force in entertainment.
And that right there is the big question. How does an empire worth $5 billion just completely crumble and become worthless in about a decade? You don't just disappear by accident. A catastrophic mistake had to be made. So, let's get into it. To really understand the fall, you first have to appreciate just how high they were flying. For millions of us, Blockbuster wasn't just another store. No way. It was the absolute king of Friday night. It was a ritual. Think about it, right? You'd go to this physical store, you'd see that giant blue and yellow ticket stub logo. You paid for each movie you rented, and everybody knew to rush in on Tuesdays for the new releases. It was this whole family experience. But a massive part of their business model and a huge chunk of their profits came from something everyone hated, those dreaded late fees. And you're going to want to remember that part because it becomes incredibly important.
So while Blockbuster was ruling the world, something else was happening, something different. These weird little red envelopes started showing up in people's mailboxes. At first, it just seemed like a quirky little novelty, nothing to worry about. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. Look at the difference. Blockbuster was all about going to a physical store, paying for each movie, and getting hit with penalties if you were late. Netflix, on the other hand, DVDs by mail, a flat monthly fee, and this was the killer, their whole brand was built on the promise of no late fees. They were total opposites.
Okay, so this brings us to the moment. The one meeting in Dallas, Texas, back in the year 2000 that could have totally rewritten the history of how we watch movies today. Yep, you heard that right. This little startup, Netflix, led by its CEO Reed Hastings, went to the undisputed champion, Blockbuster, with a big idea. They said, hey, let us run your online brand. Let's team up.
And here's the price tag, $50 million. Now, for an empire worth billions, this was literally pocket change. It was a tiny little investment to swallow up a new competitor and bring their innovative model in-house.
But Blockbuster didn't see a future. They saw a joke. According to the people who were in that room, the Blockbuster executives basically laughed them out. They thought Netflix was just some tiny internet business. And remember, this was right after the dot-com bubble had burst. They thought the whole internet thing was just hysteria.
So you have to ask, why? Why on earth would they say no? Well, it wasn't just arrogance. Here's the crucial part. A huge chunk of Blockbuster's profits, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, came directly from those late fees everyone hated. If they adopted the Netflix model, they'd have to kill their own golden goose. They couldn't see the long-term future because they were so focused on protecting their short-term cash cow.
And that single no, well, it set two completely different futures into motion. From that day on, Netflix was innovating, and Blockbuster was always playing catch-up, chasing a future it had already laughed out of the room. And you can see it so clearly on this timeline. 4 years after saying no, Blockbuster finally tries to copy Netflix with their own DVD by mail service. But it was way too late. By 2007, Netflix had already moved on to the next big thing, streaming. Blockbuster was fighting the last war, while Netflix was busy inventing the next one. And the end result? Bankruptcy. Game over.
This story is so much bigger than just old video stores. It's a masterclass in business strategy. It's probably the most famous cautionary tale about what can happen when you get too successful. In fact, there's a name for what happened. It's called disruptive innovation. This is the textbook example. It's when a smaller, cheaper, more convenient company, like Netflix, starts at the bottom, gets ignored, and then just relentlessly works its way up until it completely takes over. See, Netflix didn't try to beat Blockbuster at its own game, it just invented a brand new game altogether.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? The lessons are so clear. Never get so comfortable that you laugh at the little guy. Always focus on what your customers will want tomorrow, not just on what makes you money today, like those late fees. And maybe the hardest lesson of all, you have to be willing to break your own successful business before somebody else does it for you. And that kind of leaves us with this one last fascinating question to think about. This exact same story, the giant leader, the small disruptor, It's playing out right now in dozens of industries. The only question is, who's going to see the future coming, and who's going to end up as a fond memory? Something to think about.